Hi everybody, welcome back to the Claremont Classic Garage. Today we're going to continue working on our 1948 8N, and we're going to be putting the axle bearings and brakes and all that stuff together. Alright, so we're going to do the right side first, and then as we go I'll show you when we get to the left side what few little differences there are between the right and left sides. First thing we're going to do is put our axle shaft in. Now, these things, Cooper, these things are pretty robust, but there is a couple of things you want to check. Make sure the end of it isn't all burred up. If it is, just dress it down as smooth as you can with some kind of grinder and it's fine. And of course, you want to check your bearing. This bearing is fine. It's just pressed on from this side. So if you need to replace this bearing, you just break the cage, and then you can hold it up like that and heat around. A MAP gas torch might even do it and get it moving to get it off, and then push the new one on. But this axle is A-okay. So we're just going to stick it in. Again, if this was a later 8N, like a late 1950 and up, it would have a machined surface here, and it would have an inner axle seal, so we would grease this up and of course we put a new axle seal in it before we put it together. But the early ones, they just go in like this. You jiggle it in, make sure you engage the differential, and there she is, home. Once it's in there, we could just smear a little grease around on it. This will be lubricated by the actual axle lube, but we just put a little bit of grease on it for that first little bit before the axle lube gets to it. Next thing we need to put in is our brake shaft, but first we have to build it up. Now, how you tell them, there's a right and a left. The one with two keyways, in the middle and back there, this is the right hand one. The one for the left side only has one keyway. So the first thing we do is drop our inspection cover. It's not really an inspection cover. It's the little door that seals where this goes through the backing plate. Don't steal my parts, buddy. Thank you. And then it's got this little retainer spring that we slide down over it. And you put that on just by turning it. You just turn it down. And we're not going to push it all the way in right now. We're just going to leave it back there. So long as it's past that second keyway, you're good. Now, we can start putting the pedals and stuff on. I need my little hammer. So this keyway is for the brake pedal. So we'll get that on and we'll slide the brake pedal over. This is the right brake pedal. I forgot a little trick. You just get a chisel and kind of stick it in here, and it'll spread it open just a tiny bit to let you have an easier time sliding this thing over this shaft. Once we've got the brake pedal on, then we can go ahead and install our second key. And we can install the parking brake lever. There we go. And there'll be some slight adjustment in and out. We'll do that once everything is fully assembled. Now we can start putting the end of it together. So these are the long bolts. They will actually in the end go through from this way, but for now we're just using them as guides. So first thing, a new paper gasket. The original gaskets were steel shims, and sometimes they're a little bit banged up. What we get now for them is these paper gaskets. They're just fine, so there's no problem at all with using those. Now, here's where you need a lot of hands. So we're going to get our brake shaft and our backing plate. So that goes through there like that, and then it turns. And then that ball goes in there. And then we feed our guide bolts through. And there we are. Now, next thing, another paper gasket. And then, hello, a bearing retainer. And again, we'll put a little grease on the inside of this just because we can. Now, you'll see here, 2 of these holes are threaded. They go to the top and bottom. What a pair of helpers I've got here, I'll tell you. Okay, so now we've got that done. We'll get the, well, there you go, you two. Okay, so now these go through there like that. They're the ones this long, not the really short ones. They're for the other side. Okay, and let me find a wrench. Last thing we'll do is torque these 2 little bolts to 60 foot-pounds. This one's not so easy. You can see the trumpet kind of gets in the way, but I think we'll just do that one with a wrench. All right, so now that's as far as we can go on this side for now, because we have to go to the other side and get the backing plate and everything like this installed so we can set the end play on our axles. So same procedure on this side. We're going to make sure the end of the axle is okay, which it is. We'll put a little dab of grease on it. Our bearing is in good shape, and the splines and threads and everything also look good. So we're going to go ahead and slide this axle in here. Get it engaged in the diff. And in she goes. Oops, I put the wrong brake pedal on this side, but I fixed it now. Now we can set our preload. So we'll use a gasket and then the backing plate and then another gasket like we did on the other side. Now here's something to watch for. If your tractor has been like this one, where the hub was so worn, the splines, that it went down and started touching the bottom of the bearing retainer here, you're going to end up with this really nasty burr in here, and that thing will cut you like you've never been cut before. So before you put this on, just grab a half round file and clean that up. Here's the original shim pack that was in there. So we're just going to go ahead and put that right back. Then we'll install the bearing cup or retainer over that and install the 2 short bolts from behind and torque them up and see what our end play is. We've pulled this thing down and it won't even turn. So we're going to take it back off and put some more shims. I don't think I've got any more steel ones. Oh no, I see one steel shim over there. So we'll throw that one in and see what we get. So there's a couple of different ways you can tell if you've got this adjustment right. The first thing we're going to do is make sure that everything turns easily. And it does. It's smooth. There's no tight spots or anything. You could check if there's any like end play that you could, clunk, clunk, clunk that you could feel. You probably need to remove a bit of shim and tighten it up some. With a dial indicator, you may be able to see a few thousandths of end play. That'd be just fine. But a way that's described in the manual to check this is with the transmission in neutral. If you turn one axle one direction and the other one turns the opposite direction, that means that the axle shafts aren't jammed together so tightly that they're gonna gall. So we're going to do that now. I'm going to go to the other side. I'm going to turn the right axle in a forward direction, and the left axle should go in the reverse direction, and we know that we're good. And there she goes. So we know we've got this adjusted properly, so we can carry on and install the brakes. We installed the left-hand brake shaft. It's in. It's a little different. It doesn't have a pedal on this one. And it uses this actuating arm. Next, we're going to install the clutch cross shaft, which also doubles as the left-hand brake cross shaft. Now we're going to install the cross shaft for the left-hand brake, which also gives us the pivot point for our clutch pedal. So we're just going to put a little grease on here. Slide our clutch pedal over. We'll worry about the actual clutch adjustment later, once the engine and everything are all back on and together. And then that guy just goes through there like that. And you can see there how the clutch pedal picks up that clevis there to operate the clutch. Now we can put on the other brake pedal, which we mistakenly already put on once. Once that shaft is through, we install this Woodruff key. And then we can put our other brake pedal on. And there it is, installed. The operating rod for the left brake will just be installed loose. We're not going to put any cotter pins on our clevis pins for now, because we're going to have to take this thing off again and set it to adjust the height of that brake pedal. So what I'm doing right now is test fitting this here hub to see how far down on the splines it goes, and it goes a long way down. So what's going to happen here is when we try to tighten the nut against this, the nut is going to push the hub only so far, and then it's going to bottom out on the ends of the axle spline, and that's no good. You'll never ever get this axle tight. So we're going to do a little interesting repair job on this, but we're not ready to do that yet. So the first thing that goes on when we're putting this together, nobody ever remembers to put these in, and this is very, very, very important. What this does, this seals the back of the hub against the shoulder on the axle in here, and keeps your axle grease from coming out through the splines. And at least when that happens, it doesn't go all over your brakes, but it runs all down the outside of your wheel, and it's a big ugly mess. So the first thing we put on is this. And I'm glad to finally put these on, because these guys have been stealing them for a couple of days. I have to keep chasing them down and getting it back. Okay. Now we're going to go ahead and put on the, I call this the spider. It's the same left and right. So I've just used a couple of old 7/16 studs here as guide bolts to get this thing on. And we make sure that our brake shaft gets up over it like that. Then, another thing that everybody forgets and was missing from this little gasket goes in there like that. And that seals the back of the axle seal retainer to the end of the axle housing. Get on there, you little thing. This one's real stubborn like. Just be patient and work it in. There we go. All right. Now once you got that in, we'll get our seal. You can buy them both ways. You can buy them with the retainer, which is how these ones came, or you can buy just the seals and reuse your existing retainer. There's a couple of ways you can do it. And then that goes over that. Now, when I took this thing apart, this gasket and the rubber gasket in the back were both missing. No wonder the brakes were soaked on this one. There. And now that we've got that done, these 4 bolts go right through everything. There's a lot of paint in them holes, I think. Then our little guide studs can come out. Okay. And now these really little short bolts go in the top and bottom here. And then on the back we put a lock washer and a nut on those 4 long bolts. Now we'll do the same job on the other side. So you can see on this side we've got a lot more room to push the hub on before it bottoms out. So we don't have to worry about any repairs or anything at all on this side. So we can just carry on installing our seal and spider. Now we can put the brake shoes on. So first thing we're doing here is servicing up our adjusters. Just took it apart, cleaned up the threads, and put it back together with a little anti-seize. So we're gonna put the brake shoes on. There's not a top and a bottom, but they are like left and right, and it's got to do with this bracket. So this bracket goes at the back. And then what we do, this is our spring anchor. We push that through like that. And we do the same on this one. Whoops. And the shoe goes on like that, minus my finger. And I hold it up with my knee. And we use our brake spring plier to hook on our spring. I think maybe like this. Oh no, I've got the wrong tool. Excuse me. Now this is a little tricky here because we got that pedal there hanging down, putting a bunch of load on it. But this should pull it all up. Ta-da! Okay, there we go. And now our pedal's up where it should be. Once we've got that on, then we can go ahead and put in the star wheel. Like so. And then the other spring. It just goes like that, and that's what holds the star wheel in position. But I kind of think it goes that way. That's what way we're going to put it anyway. Now getting this one in a little more tricky, but we'll see if we can manage it. Okay, so we got that just about. Just got to tap it the rest of the way home. It's kind of, there we go. There. So that, you can see there the spring. When you do your adjustment, it goes click, 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 click. And the spring is what holds the star wheel in place. So we'll go put the other side together, and I'll show you the one small difference on the other side. Now on the left side of the tractor, we've got one extra spring that goes on. And that is because they just figure with all this extra mechanical stuff going on, because that brake pedal crosses over through a cross shaft and all this rod and everything. So they decided to put one extra spring on this side. And it just goes like that. And sometimes if you buy a brake spring kit, guys will take this extra spring and put it on the other side anyway, just because. But you don't really need it on the right side. You only need it on the left. All right, so now it's time to put the hubs on. This hub just goes on because we already determined that it's okay. So you gotta just get it, I put a little grease on the back of it too to help it work through the seal. And what I do as an extra little measure to make sure I don't end up with oil streaming down my fancy wheels is I just put a little bit of silicone around the end there where the washer touches. And I also put another little bit on the face of it where the nut goes. I gotta go get my big socket. We'll just get these kind of snugged up for now, and I'll actually tighten it. Well, it's not even getting down on there. I'm gonna have to get the air gun. We'll actually tighten it once the wheels are on and the weight is on the machine. We'll get the big torque wrench out and reef them up, because these nuts go up to 450 foot-pounds. That's a lot. So now we've determined that this spline is kind of worn out and the hub goes too far down. So what I've done successfully in the past is I've actually shimmed the splines. So we're going to try that on this one and see how it works. So I just use this material. It's, I don't know, 10 or 12 thousandths of an inch thick. And it seems to be just the ticket for this job. So I make these little things and I just put a little hook on the end of them. So when it goes in, it doesn't get pulled right down in. And I've successfully tightened up many hubs. And the repair seems to last. So, same like on the other side. We'll butter up the back of this with some grease for when it first goes through the seal. And we'll just push these one by one. We'll just push these in. Yeah, all right. So we'll start pulling this in with the nut and see how far we get. You want to get it so that you've got a few threads out beyond the nut, and then you know you've got it set correctly. This stuff may in turn end up being a little too thick, and I might have to get some thinner stuff. We'll find out. So you can see here, we've got the nut down beyond the end of the axle. Anywhere from there to, another couple of threads more is in the good range. It's got the hub far enough into the seal that it's going to seal. It's got it far enough in that it's contacted that rubber tube that's in there that seals the hub to the axle. We're golden. So now we're just going to make sure that our brake, the shoes are closed tight and it's got a little free play there. That's just wear and tear. Originally it wouldn't have had that much, but that's fine. And we're going to make sure that the brakes apply and spring back. Now at this point, before we put the drum on, there's one more step, and I'm going to skip it, and it's one of those things that the jury is out on. Originally, in this groove, there was a felt seal that went all the way around, that completely sealed. It was like a seal for the brakes to keep water and dust and stuff from getting in. Problem with those is it also keeps stuff from getting out. I've never put them on any of my tractors, and I've never had a problem. Even if you go fording through a creek with it, it's just going to drain right back out. It's better. So let's get our drum on and we'll get these things adjusted up. Now we got the drums going back on here. I put lots of anti-seize on the screws. This hub has 4 screw holes, and for some reason the hub on the other side only has 2. So now we're going to adjust the brakes up. It's pretty much just like a car. You kind of adjust them up till they drag and then back them off a hair. All the while you just kind of keep working it and making sure they're staying centered. So same job on this side, but for some reason this hub only has 2 screw holes, which is fine. So there's kind of what we're aiming for. We've adjusted the actuator rod so that the pedals are at the same height. And then we adjust the star wheel in this one so that when we apply the brakes, both pedals go down pretty much the same distance to activate the brake. That's good. So we can close up that adjuster hole. These are what go in there, these little metal plugs. You can get them at any of the Ford tractor parts places. And then the last thing we have to do is tighten the cinch bolts on all our clevises and pedals and stuff, and double check that the pedals stay in the same place. Now that we've got all our final adjustments done, we can go ahead and install the cotter pins on our actuating rod. Lastly, we just have to tighten up the jam nut on our actuating rod. And that's all the mechanical part of this job done. Now we got to do the most important part. Now let's get our red paint and go around and touch up all these bolt heads and stuff. Okay, so that's a wrap on that. I decided not to paint these nuts on here because it is kind of a, the rear hubs are kind of a maintenance thing, and one thing that always drives me nuts is trying to get a wrench over the head of a bolt that's covered in paint. So we'll just leave them natural, that's fine. And I need to paint this little bit of the hub and the end of the axle, but with these two dogs running around out here, I can't do that right now, or they'll both have red racing stripes down the sides of them, so I'll wait till they're in the house to do that. Anyway, that'll wrap it up, I guess, for this one. So we've got our brakes and axle bearings and everything all ready to go. In the next video, we're going to get the engine mated back to it and get it all dressed out. And until then, I'd like to thank you for tuning in and hope you'll join us next time on the Claremont Classic Garage. So long for now.